The sound of shattering glass pierced the quiet Wyoming evening as Hannah Graves fled from the saloon, blood trickling from her split lip. Dodge City in 1878 was unforgiving to women without protection, and tonight, she had lost what little she had. Her legs carried her through the dusty streets, the setting sun casting long shadows that matched the darkness in her heart. The church steeple loomed in the distance, her only hope for sanctuary. Hannah collapsed behind the weathered clapboard church, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her eye throbbed, already swelling shut from the blow her now ex-fiancé had delivered when she'd refused to hand over her meager savings. 2 years of empty promises and escalating cruelty had culminated in this final, brutal betrayal. She pressed her back against the rough wooden wall, trying to quiet her sobs. The cool evening air stung her injuries, but the physical pain paled in comparison to the ache in her chest. 23 years old and alone in a town where she knew almost no one, Hannah had never felt more lost. The soft crunch of boots on gravel made her freeze. Someone was coming around the side of the church. Hannah shrank further into the shadows, her heart hammering. Had Calvin found her already? She couldn't endure another beating. "Hello," a deep voice called out softly. "I know someone's back here. I ain't looking to cause trouble." Hannah remained silent, eyes fixed on the approaching figure, tall, broad-shouldered, and silhouetted against the dying light. A cowboy, by the look of him, with a wide-brimmed hat and the distinctive bow-legged gait of a man who lived in the saddle. When he drew closer, he slowed, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Madam, are you hurt?" The genuine concern in his voice made Hannah's resolve waver. She'd learned the hard way not to trust men's gentle words, but she was cornered with nowhere to run. The man knelt down, keeping a respectful distance. The last rays of sunlight illuminated a face weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were kind. Not much older than 30, Hannah guessed. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered when he saw her face. "Who did this to you?" Hannah's voice cracked as she tried to speak. "Please. Just leave me be." "I can't do that, madam. Not with you hurt like this." He extended a hand, then thought better of it and lowered it. "Yates Flannery, at your service. I ride for the Double Creek Ranch north of town." Hannah said nothing, studying him warily. "I've got a canteen," he offered, "and a clean handkerchief, if you'd permit me to help." After a moment's hesitation, Hannah nodded slightly. Yates moved slowly, telegraphing each movement as he uncorked his canteen and dampened a white cloth. He offered it to her rather than touching her himself. "Thank you," she whispered, pressing the cool cloth to her swollen eye. "Was it your husband?" Yates asked quietly. "Fiancé," Hannah corrected, surprising herself with her willingness to answer. "Former fiancé now, I suppose." Yates' jaw tightened. Man who raises a hand to a woman isn't fit to be called a man at all. They sat in silence for a moment, the distant piano music from the saloons floating on the evening breeze. "You got somewhere safe to go tonight, Mississippi?" "Graves. Hannah Graves. And no, I don't." The admission hurt almost as much as her injuries. "I was staying at the boarding house, but Calvin he'll look for me there." Yates nodded thoughtfully. "The church might take you in. Reverend Powell's a good man." "The Reverend's away until Sunday," Hannah said. "I clean for his wife sometimes." Yates frowned. "Well, you can't stay out here all night." He thought for a moment. "My sister runs a millinery shop with rooms above. She'd take you in, no questions asked." Hannah hesitated, weighing her limited options. "No one will hurt you again," Yates said softly, his voice carrying a promise that seemed to reach beyond this moment. "Not while I draw breath." Something in his earnest declaration broke through Hannah's defenses. She'd heard pretty words before, but never spoken with such conviction. "Why help me? You don't know me." Yates stood slowly, offering his hand. "My ma taught me that a man's measure isn't in how he treats his equals, but in how he treats those who need help." Hannah studied his outstretched hand, calloused and strong. Taking it would mean trusting again, something she'd sworn never to do. But the alternative was a night in the cold, or worse, being found by Calvin. She placed her trembling hand in his. "Thank you, Mr. Flannery." "Just Yates, madam. And you're welcome." He helped her to her feet with a gentleness that belied his strength, then removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "It's a short walk. Stay close." They moved through the back streets of Dodge City, avoiding the main thoroughfare where the saloons and gambling halls blazed with light and activity. Hannah felt the weight of curious stares from those they passed, but Yates kept a respectful distance while ensuring she felt protected. The millinery shop was dark, but a light glowed in the upstairs window. Yates knocked on the side door, a distinctive pattern that suggested a code between siblings. The door opened to reveal a woman with the same strong features as Yates, her curious expression shifting to concern when she saw Hannah. "Eleanor, this is Miss Graves. She needs a safe place tonight." Eleanor Flannery didn't waste time with questions. "Come in, both of you. I'll put the kettle on." The apartment above the shop was small but tidy, with feminine touches that spoke of Eleanor's attempts to create a home. Hannah sank gratefully into a chair by the stove while Eleanor examined her injuries with gentle hands. "Calvin Blackwood's work, I'd wager," Eleanor said grimly. Hannah looked up in surprise. "You know him?" "Know of him. He's got a reputation." Eleanor exchanged a look with her brother. "This isn't the first time he's left marks on a woman." Yates paced by the window, his expression darkening. "Where can I find him?" "No," Hannah said sharply. "Please, I don't want any more trouble." Eleanor placed a restraining hand on her brother's arm. "She's right, Yates. Blackwood's got friends in this town. Besides, she needs help more than he needs punishment right now." Yates reluctantly nodded, though the set of his jaw suggested the matter wasn't settled in his mind. Eleanor prepared a simple meal and showed Hannah to a small guest room. "You're safe here," she assured her. "Rest now. Things will look clearer in the morning." When Hannah was settled, Eleanor rejoined her brother in the small sitting room. "What's your plan?" she asked quietly. "Haven't got one yet," Yates admitted. "But I aim to see her safe." "She's pretty beneath those bruises," Eleanor observed. Yates gave his sister a warning look. "That's not why I'm helping her." "I know." Eleanor smiled. "That's why I approve." The next morning, Hannah woke to the unfamiliar comfort of clean sheets and safety. Her eye had swollen shut overnight, and her body ached with each movement, but the knot of fear in her chest had loosened slightly. Eleanor provided a simple dress that fit well enough and helped Hannah arrange her hair to partially conceal her injuries. Over breakfast, the inevitable question arose. "What will you do now?" Eleanor asked gently. Hannah stared into her coffee cup. "I don't know. I have a little money saved. Calvin didn't get it all. Maybe enough for a stagecoach ticket." "Where would you go?" Yates asked. "I have a cousin in Denver," Hannah said, though the prospect of arriving unannounced on a distant relative's doorstep held little appeal. Yates cleared his throat. "The Double Creek is short-handed. The ranch owner's wife has been looking for help with cooking and such. It's honest work, good pay, and far enough from town that Blackwood wouldn't trouble you." Hannah looked up in surprise. "You'd recommend me? You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Yates said simply. Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Sullivan is a fine woman. You could do worse, Hannah." The idea of escaping town, of finding work where Calvin couldn't easily reach her, was tempting. But Hannah had learned to be cautious. Would I be expected to?" she faltered. "It's respectable work," Yates assured her, understanding her unspoken concern. "Mrs. Sullivan runs a proper household. The hands live in the bunkhouse, away from the main house." Hannah considered the offer. "I can cook. And I'm good with a needle." "That's settled then," Eleanor said. "Yates can take you out there today." Hannah hesitated. "I need to collect my things from the boarding house first." Yates nodded. "I'll go with you." Eleanor patted Hannah's hand. "I'll close the shop and come too. Safety in numbers." They set out mid-morning, the bustling town already alive with commerce and travelers. Hannah felt exposed in the daylight, certain that Calvin would appear at any moment. Yates walked beside her, projecting a calm assurance that gradually steadied her nerves. The boarding house was quiet when they arrived. Mrs. Winters, the landlady, raised her eyebrows at Hannah's bruised face, but asked no questions when she said she was leaving town. "Your gentleman friend was looking for you," Mrs. Winters said as Hannah packed her meager belongings. Quite insistent. Hannah's hands trembled as she folded her dresses. "When? Last night, and again this morning. I told him I hadn't seen you since yesterday." Yates stood by the door, his presence a comfort as Hannah gathered her life into one small carpet bag. She'd come to Dodge City with dreams of marriage and a home of her own. Now she was fleeing with little more than she'd arrived with 2 years earlier. As they left the boarding house, Hannah caught a glimpse of a familiar figure across the street. Calvin Blackwood stood outside the general store, his back to them as he spoke with another man. Hannah froze, her breath catching. Yates followed her gaze and immediately placed himself between her and Calvin's line of sight. "Keep walking," he said quietly. "He hasn't seen us." They continued down the boardwalk, Hannah's heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. They'd almost reached the corner when a shout went up behind them. "Hannah! Hannah Graves!" She didn't turn, quickening her pace instead. "Don't you walk away from me, woman." Heavy footsteps pounded on the wooden boardwalk. Yates pushed Hannah gently toward his sister. "Get her to your shop," he said. "I'll handle this." Eleanor nodded, taking Hannah's arm. "Come on." Hannah glanced back to see Yates turning to face Calvin, who had almost reached them. Calvin was a big man, fashionably dressed, but with a mean set to his mouth that Hannah knew all too well. "This isn't your concern, cowboy," Calvin snarled. "The lady doesn't want to speak with you," Yates replied evenly. "I suggest you move along." Calvin's face flushed with anger. "That's my fiancée you're interfering with." "Not anymore," Hannah said, finding her voice. "It's over, Calvin." Calvin's expression darkened as he took in her bruised face. Then Yates standing protectively between them. "So that's how it is? You run off with the first saddle tramp who offers." "Mind your tongue," Yates warned. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation. Calvin, aware of the audience, straightened his coat. "Hannah, darling, you're upset. Let's talk privately." His voice dripped with false concern. "That unfortunate incident last night, I lost my temper. It won't happen again." "You're right about that," Hannah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Because I won't be there." Calvin's facade cracked. "You ungrateful." Yates stepped closer, his voice pitched low. She said her piece. "Now walk away while you still can." For a tense moment, Hannah thought Calvin would lunge at Yates. Instead, he spat on the ground near Yates' boots. "This isn't finished," he warned, his gaze shifting to Hannah. "You'll come crawling back when he's done with you." With that, he turned and stalked away, shouldering roughly through the onlookers. Yates watched until Calvin disappeared into the saloon, then turned back to Hannah. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her legs felt unsteady. "Thank you." Eleanor squeezed her arm supportively. "Let's get back to the shop. You can rest before the ride to Double Creek." The remainder of the morning passed in a blur of preparation. Eleanor packed food for their journey and insisted Hannah take several practical dresses that needed only minor alterations. "I can't accept all this," Hannah protested. "Consider it an investment in your future," Eleanor said firmly. "Besides, some of these were commission pieces that were never collected. They're just gathering dust here." By early afternoon, they were ready to depart. Yates had arranged for a wagon rather than having Hannah ride horseback, considering her injuries and belongings. Eleanor embraced Hannah warmly. "Write to me. And remember, you always have a place here if you need it." The journey to Double Creek Ranch took several hours, following a winding trail north from Dodge City. The landscape opened up into rolling prairie, dotted with cottonwoods along the creek beds. Hannah found herself relaxing as the distance from town increased, breathing more freely with each mile. Yates pointed out landmarks as they traveled, speaking easily about the land and the cattle operation at Double Creek. Hannah learned he'd been working there for 5 years, after drifting through several territories following the war. "Were you a soldier?" she asked. "Barely. Joined up at 16, last year of the fighting. Saw enough to know I never wanted to see more." His expression grew distant. "Lost my pa and older brother both to that war." "I'm sorry," Hannah said softly. Yates shrugged. "It was a long time ago. Made me grow up fast, is all." As the sun began its descent, they crested a hill to reveal a picturesque valley below. A substantial ranch house stood near a creek, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. In the distance, cattle grazed on the lush spring grass. "Double Creek," Yates announced, named for the 2 branches that join up behind the main house. Hannah took in the peaceful scene, so different from the dusty streets and crowded boardwalks of Dodge City. "It's beautiful." Yates glanced at her. "It grows on you." They were met in the yard by a dignified woman in her 50s, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Mrs. Sullivan," greeted Yates warmly before turning curious eyes to Hannah. "Mrs. Sullivan," "This is Miss Hannah Graves," Yates said. "The lady I mentioned might be looking for work." If Mrs. Sullivan was shocked by Hannah's bruised face, she gave no sign. "Welcome to Double Creek, Miss Graves. Yates tells me you're handy in the kitchen and with a needle." "Yes, madam," Hannah replied. "I'm a hard worker." "Good. We need that around here." Mrs. Sullivan's assessing gaze was kind but thorough. "You'll have your own room off the kitchen. Meals with the family, Sundays to yourself. We pay fair wages, once a month." "That sounds more than fair," Hannah said, relief washing over her. Then it settled. "Yates, show Miss Graves to her quarters while I finish supper preparations." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the vegetable garden. After the boarding house, it felt luxuriously private. "The Sullivans are good people," Yates said, setting down her carpetbag. "You'll be safe here." Hannah turned to face him. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," he said. He hesitated. "Just be happy here, if you can." In the weeks that followed, Hannah settled into life at Double Creek. The work was hard but satisfying, and Mrs. Sullivan proved to be a fair employer who appreciated Hannah's skills. Mr. Sullivan, a taciturn man with a limp from a cattle drive accident, was equally fair in his dealings, treating Hannah with the same respect he showed his wife. Yates kept a respectful distance, though Hannah often felt his eyes on her when they crossed paths. He took his meals with the other hands in the bunkhouse, but occasionally joined the family for Sunday dinner, where his quiet humor and thoughtful observations gradually drew Hannah out of her shell. As her bruises faded, so too did some of the wariness in her heart. The nightmares of Calvin's rage came less frequently, replaced by dreamless sleep earned through honest work. One Sunday in June, nearly 2 months after her arrival, Hannah walked down to the creek after dinner. The afternoon was warm, the cottonwoods providing dappled shade as she followed the well-worn path. She found a flat rock overlooking a deep pool and sat, removing her shoes to dangle her feet in the cool water. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Yates stood a few yards away, his hat in his hands. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Hannah smiled. "Please do." He settled beside her, leaving a proper distance between them. "You're looking well, Miss Graves." "Hannah," she corrected. "And thank you. I feel well." They sat in companionable silence, watching the water flow over smooth stones. A fish jumped, leaving concentric ripples on the surface. "I had a letter from Eleanor yesterday," Hannah said eventually. "She says Calvin Blackwood left town. Apparently, his creditors finally caught up with him." Yates nodded. "Good riddance. She also said you asked about my welfare in every letter you write her." A flush crept up Yates' neck. "Just being neighborly." Hannah smiled. "Is that what it is?" Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Yates cleared his throat. "I've been meaning to ask if you'd like to attend the Independence Day celebration in town next week. The Sullivans always go, and most of the hands too. Are you asking to escort me, Mr. Flannery?" "If you'd be amenable," he said carefully. "No obligation, of course." Hannah considered him this quiet, steady man who had shown her nothing but respect and kindness. "I'd like that very much." The 4th of July celebration was the biggest social event of the summer. The entire county gathered in the small town nearest Double Creek for a day of food, games, speeches, and dancing. Hannah wore her best dress, freshly altered to fit her properly, with a ribbon in her hair that Eleanor had sent in her last package. Yates cleaned up remarkably well, his usually windblown hair tamed, his Sunday suit pressed. He offered Hannah his arm as they walked from the wagons to the town square, his expression a mixture of pride and nervousness that she found endearing. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Hannah felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Thank you." The day passed in a whirl of activity. They watched sack races and egg tosses, applauded the patriotic speeches, and ate more fried chicken and pie than seemed possible. As evening approached, musicians set up on a platform, and couples began to gather for dancing. "Would you care to dance?" Yates asked, extending his hand. Hannah hesitated only briefly before taking it. "I'd love to." They joined the other couples as the fiddles struck up a lively tune. Yates proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding Hannah confidently through the steps. His hand at her waist was gentle but secure, his eyes never leaving hers. As the music slowed to a waltz, he drew her slightly closer. still maintaining a respectful distance. "I never properly thanked you," Hannah said softly. "For what?" "For finding me that night. For helping me when you had no reason to." Yates' expression grew serious. "I had every reason. No one deserves to be treated that way, especially not someone as kind and strong as you." "You thought I was strong?" "When I was hiding and crying." "Surviving isn't weakness, Hannah. It takes courage to leave, to start again." The simple truth of his words touched something deep within her. Here was a man who saw her strength when she'd felt most vulnerable, who respected her enough to give her space to heal. "Yates," she said softly, "I think I'm beginning to care for you a great deal." His step faltered slightly, surprise and hope flashing across his face. "I've cared for you since that first night," he admitted. "But I never wanted you to feel pressured or obligated." "I don't," she assured him. "What I feel is entirely my own." The music ended, but they remained on the edge of the dance floor, reluctant to break the moment. Around them, couples dispersed, heading toward the riverbank where fireworks would soon light the night sky. "Shall we find a good spot for the display?" Yates suggested. They found a quiet place on a grassy knoll, away from the main crowd, but with a clear view of the river. Yates spread his coat on the ground for Hannah to sit on, then settled beside her. The first rockets exploded overhead in brilliant bursts of color, drawing gasps and applause. Hannah watched, entranced, as the night sky bloomed with light. When Yates' hand found hers in the darkness, she intertwined their fingers without hesitation. "Hannah," he said, his voice low, "I know it's too soon to speak of certain things, but I want you to know my intentions are honorable. I'd like to court you properly, if you're willing." Hannah turned to him, his face illuminated by the cascading lights above. In his eyes, she saw no demand, only hope and a steady affection that asked for nothing but offered everything. "I'd like that very much," she replied. As summer turned to fall, their courtship progressed with the steady, unhurried pace that characterized Yates himself. He brought her wildflowers from his rides, listened attentively to her stories, and shared pieces of his own past. They rode together on her free Sundays, exploring the rolling hills and hidden valleys of the ranch. Hannah flourished at Double Creek, taking on additional responsibilities as Mrs. Sullivan came to trust her judgment. The haunted look faded from her eyes, replaced by a quiet confidence that drew admiring glances from Yates and approval from the Sullivans. One crisp October evening, Yates invited Hannah for a ride to his favorite spot on the ranch, a high ridge overlooking the valley, where the cottonwoods had turned golden in the autumn light. "It's breathtaking," Hannah said as they dismounted. Yates secured the horses, then joined her at the edge of the ridge. "I come here to think sometimes. Helps put things in perspective." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun begin its descent. The ranch buildings below looked like a child's toys from this height, the cattle mere dots on the landscape. "Hannah," Yates said finally, turning to face her, "these past months have been the happiest of my life." She smiled up at him. "Mine too." He took her hands in his expression serious. "When I found you that night behind the church, I made a promise that no one would hurt you again. I meant it then, and I mean it even more now." Hannah's heart quickened as Yates dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "I'm not a wealthy man, and I can't offer you a life of luxury. But I can offer you my heart, my respect, and my solemn vow to cherish you all the days of my life." He swallowed hard. "Hannah Graves, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Hannah's eyes, not tears of fear or pain, but of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Yates Flannery, I will marry you." His face lit with a smile so radiant it rivaled the setting sun. He rose and pulled her gently into his arms, his lips finding hers in a tender, reverent kiss that promised a lifetime of respect and devotion. They were married on Christmas Eve in the Double Creek Ranch parlor, with the Sullivans, Eleanor, and the ranch hands in attendance. Hannah wore a gown of ivory satin that Eleanor had helped her make, with sprigs of holly in her upswept hair. Yates, almost unrecognizable in his new suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as they spoke their vows before the visiting minister. The Sullivans' wedding gift was a cabin on the eastern edge of the ranch property, a snug two-room structure with a stone fireplace and windows that caught the morning sun. It wasn't grand, but as Hannah crossed the threshold in Yates' arms that night, she knew she had found the home she'd always yearned for. spring brought new beginnings. Yates was promoted to foreman when the old one retired, bringing added responsibility and income. Hannah planted a vegetable garden beside their cabin and began taking in sewing work from neighboring ranches, building a small reputation for her fine stitching. On a warm evening in May, exactly 1 year after Yates had found her behind the church, they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" Hannah asked, her head resting against his shoulder. "Every day," Yates admitted. "If I hadn't gone to church that evening to fix that loose shutter for Reverend Powell. If I hadn't chosen that particular place to hide." He took her hand, rubbing his thumb over the simple gold band he'd placed there. "Some might call it chance. I call it providence." Hannah smiled, placing their joined hands over her stomach, where the first signs of new life were just beginning to show. "Our child will know only love and kindness." Yates' eyes widened. "Hannah, are you certain?" She nodded, joy bubbling through her. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. We'll welcome a little Flannery come November." Yates gathered her in his arms, his touch as gentle as that first night, but now filled with the familiar warmth of abiding love. "No one will ever hurt either of you," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Not while I draw breath." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that some promises were meant to be kept forever. From the broken woman who had hidden behind a church with a black eye to the beloved wife and mother to be sitting contentedly in her husband's embrace, her journey had led her home.